Hans-Ulrich Rudel, was one of the most controversial figures to emerge from the air war on the Eastern Front during the Second World War. Born in 1916 in the German province of Silesia, he grew up in a society shaped by the aftermath of the First World War and the political turbulence of the Weimar Republic. From a young age, he was fascinated by flying, athletics, and military life. When he came of age, he entered the newly rebuilt Luftwaffe, which the Nazi regime was developing as part of its militarization program. His early training showed that he was disciplined and physically capable, but he did not initially stand out as an exceptional pilot. At first, he struggled with the demands of flight school and was viewed by instructors as less promising than many of his peers. Still, he persisted, and over time, his determination and strict personal routine helped him improve. When the German invasion of Poland, and later the invasion of the Soviet Union, escalated the war, Rudel found himself on the front lines as a dive bomber pilot. He joined a unit flying the Ju-87 Stuka, an aircraft that had become one of the symbols of early German air power. The Stuka was already becoming outdated by the time he flew it, but Rudel developed a reputation for extracting every bit of performance from the aging machine. The Eastern Front was vast and brutal, and it was there that he would spend nearly all of his wartime career. His unit specialized in ground attack missions, targeting Soviet tanks, artillery, and supply routes. These missions were demanding and extremely dangerous. Pilots had to fly low, often under heavy fire, and frequently return to base with damaged aircraft. Rudel soon earned attention for his relentless flying schedule. He pushed himself far beyond the usual operational limits, sometimes completing numerous sorties in a single day. This habit, combined with his strict self-discipline, made him one of the most active pilots of the war. He became particularly known for attacking tanks, especially the heavily armored Soviet vehicles that posed major challenges to German ground forces. Rudel claimed an extraordinary number of tank kills from the air, a figure that made him famous in German military circles. These claims, while widely repeated, were shaped by the chaos of the front and the propaganda goals of the Nazi leadership. Regardless of the exact numbers, what is certain is that he was one of the most active and persistent close support pilots in the Luftwaffe. His growing fame coincided with increasing losses and hardship for German forces. As the war turned against Germany, Rudel's missions grew even more hazardous. Soviet fighters gained control over many areas of the front, and anti-aircraft defenses became more organized. Rudel was shot down numerous times. On several occasions, he landed or crashed behind enemy lines and had to escape under fire. He survived injuries, including a serious leg wound that required surgery. Late in the war, after being hit once again, doctors were forced to amputate part of his leg. Despite this, Rudel insisted on returning to flying. He had a prosthetic limb made and trained himself to use it in the cockpit, eventually convincing his superiors to allow him to resume combat flights. His persistence in returning to duty was celebrated by the Nazi regime, which used his story to promote ideals of endurance and loyalty. By the final years of the war, Rudel had become the most decorated pilot in the Luftwaffe. These honors were awarded by a government responsible for widespread atrocities, and his personal achievements existed within the propaganda framework of a criminal regime. The Nazi leadership used him frequently to boost morale and to give the impression that individual heroism could somehow reverse Germany's rapidly worsening strategic situation. Rudel embraced this role enthusiastically and showed unwavering devotion to Hitler and the ideology he represented. His loyalty to the regime continued even as Germany collapsed around him. In the last months of the war, as the Soviet army closed in on Berlin, Rudel's unit tried to slow their advance with desperate low-level attacks that achieved little beyond exposing pilots to lethal fire. When the war ended, he surrendered to American forces rather than face Soviet captivity, which he feared would be harsher due to the extent of his operations on the Eastern Front. After the war, Rudel became a polarizing public figure. Instead of distancing himself from the Nazi regime or acknowledging its crimes, he openly defended it. He aligned himself with far-right networks in post-war Germany and South America, including circles that sheltered former Nazi officials and promoted revisionist narratives about the war. During his time in South America, he built connections with various governments and military organizations, often advising on air tactics based on his wartime experience. He worked with like-minded former officers and maintained a strong ideological stance that rejected the democratic transformation taking place in West Germany. His post-war publications presented a self-styled image of a soldier who fought with honor and who believed he had acted in defense of his homeland. These writings ignored or dismissed the moral and political implications of his service under a genocidal regime. Because of this, historians have treated his accounts with caution. They contain useful material on air operations, but they are also shaped by self-justification and ideological rigidity. He portrayed himself primarily as a dedicated pilot, avoiding deeper reflection on the wider consequences of the war or the suffering inflicted by the government he served. In West Germany, Rudel became a symbol for extremist groups who admired his wartime record and his refusal to repudiate Nazism. His involvement with these groups made him a subject of concern for the West German government, which sought to prevent the spread of far-right sentiment during the Cold War. He attempted to enter politics at one point, but his candidacy was blocked due to his extremist associations. Nevertheless, he continued to influence small militant nationalist circles and remained an advocate for views that stood in direct opposition to the democratic principles the new German state was working to establish. Despite controversies surrounding him, Rudel remained unapologetic for the rest of his life. He continued to speak publicly about his wartime experiences and to maintain contact with former Luftwaffe pilots and far-right supporters. He was admired in some military aviation communities for his technical skill and endurance, but this admiration was always accompanied by warnings from historians and educators about the importance of understanding the political and moral context of his actions. Acknowledging his abilities as a pilot does not require ignoring the destructive goals of the regime he served or his own ideological commitments. He died in 1982 in West Germany. Even after his death, debates continued over how to interpret his legacy. Some people focused heavily on the sheer number of missions he flew or the damage he inflicted on Soviet armor, while others emphasized his unwavering loyalty to a violent and oppressive government. Modern historical analysis tends to treat his life as an example of how technical prowess or personal bravery can exist within and be used to support destructive political systems. His skills as an aviator were real, but they were employed in the service of an expansionist war and a regime responsible for immense human suffering. Today, Rudel's biography is used in educational contexts as a reminder that individual military achievement cannot be separated from the morality of the cause it supports. His story illustrates how personal determination and discipline do not excuse ideological extremism or participation in a war of aggression. He remains one of the most studied Luftwaffe pilots, not because he represents an ideal to be celebrated, but because his life demonstrates how complex and troubling a legacy can be when technical talent is fused with loyalty to a harmful political system. If you have a thought regarding Hans-Ulrich Rudel, drop it in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe.